Sometimes you have warning. Other times you are jolted by the impact and there is nothing you can do but try to stay safe. This video will introduce you to the resources available from the United Church of Christ to help both churches and church members take some simple steps to lessen losses and to help those impacted recover and rebuild. Minnesota has had 67 federally declared disasters in the 57 years between 1957 and 2014. Some communities are in both flood and tornado zones. Living in Minnesota, it is a good idea to be prepared. For members, we have guidebooks and checklists to help you identify what you can easily do to prepare. Go kits if you have to leave home quickly, home kits if you need to shelter in place, and car kits. When a disaster happens, we want to help. The best help at that time is to send money through a known and trusted organization, such as the UCC Disaster Ministries.
People poured in to help. So then having folks able to figure out what kind of help is needed and do that in a useful kind of way is a challenge. Otherwise, volunteers end up standing around and not knowing what to do.
While digging out from the disaster, the local community does not have the time or resources to manage volunteers not connected to an organization or contributions of clothes, toys, household items, food that may not be needed. Wait until there are specific requests. Help is often needed long after a disaster, or sometimes because life deals a bad hand.
If you've ever thought about going on a mission trip, I think the Back Bay experience would be a good first time for several reasons. But it is UCC, but it's also well organized. You do receive some training. The accommodations are comfortable. It is well organized, and for a first time especially, I would recommend something that's organized and sort of permanent, and also where I felt that the people who were working there as long-term volunteers and then also actual employees, the social workers and case managers and such, really felt a deep passion for what they were doing.
My name is Zach Walgamuth. I'm the executive for UCC Disaster Ministries, a volunteer-driven program of the United Church of Christ that responds to disasters all over the world. Each year in the U.S., UCC Disaster Ministries responds to dozens of disasters, from tornadoes to earthquakes to fires to floods to hurricanes. We can't do our work without you, the volunteer. There are lots of organizations that respond to disasters. Lots of them provide early relief support, from sheltering to feeding to debris removal and cleanup work. Too often, communities and individuals feel forgotten just months after a disaster. CNN is no longer there. FEMA has completed their work, but there's still work to be done. UCC Disaster Ministries takes a different role. We work closely with communities and survivors who can't afford to hire contractors to rebuild their homes. Through this work, we provide volunteer labor to help repair and rebuild homes and to restore lives. We're not always the first on the scene, but oftentimes we're the last to leave. We need your support. We need volunteers. You don't have to be a carpenter. So many times, the most important thing that you can do as a volunteer is to sit and listen to the survivor and their story. There's hope and there's healing in the work that we do. Please join us in helping those who have suffered through disasters recover and restore hope in humanity and in Christ. Thank you.
Well, I learned the hard way how important disaster ministries are and how important it is to be prepared for anything to happen. I was living on the Gulf Coast and serving at Back Bay Mission when Hurricane Katrina came through in 2005, and over the next several years was engaged in recovery efforts. And my experience in that was that the church is the first to arrive and they are the last to leave. The church is what stands with those who are suffering and in the midst of that disaster from beginning to end. If the church is prepared, and if there are people ready to connect with those on the ground who are needing that assistance and who know what the real needs are. So when I came to Minnesota and realized we didn't have a disaster coordinator here, that was one of the things I wanted to address as quickly as I could. I want to encourage congregations to have their own preparedness plans in the event of disasters. Again, when I was at Back Bay, that was something we didn't have, but after Katrina, we had it then for any future possibilities. It's so important to have a plan so that you can communicate with your folks after a disaster, so that you're prepared ahead of time, so that you have kind of a process laid out for yourselves should the worst happen in your neighborhood. So make those plans. Think about how you might engage if there were an opportunity in Minnesota to respond to a disaster and led by our disaster coordinator. Be ready to step up and to volunteer, because I can't tell you how much that means to the people in the middle of a disaster.